Well, now on BBC News, it's Hard Talk. Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Stephen Sackur. Is the African National Congress, the iconic movement of South Africa's liberation struggle, close to the end of its useful life? And if so, will its demise be quick or slow and painful? At the end of this year, current party leader and president of the country, Jacob Zuma, will quit as party chief. A host of candidates, including his ex-wife, are vying to replace him. My guest is former interim president of South Africa and ANC stalwart Kgalema Motlanthe. Are the most respected ANCers ready to contemplate a new political home? Kgalema Motlanthe, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks to the viewers.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And if I may, I'm going to start with some of your own very well-chosen words from a year ago. Back then, you said, if the ANC is no longer addressing the problems of our people, well, we might as well begin writing its obituary. Have you written its obituary?
Not yet. Not yet, because, you know, the obituary is really to be written by the people themselves.
Do you think it's inevitable?
It's not inevitable. It's not inevitable. It depends on how the ANC positions itself and how it renews itself and how it connects to the people and begin to understand that it exists for sole purpose of addressing the concerns of the people.
Well, what the people have seen, since you said that rather damning statement, what the people have seen is a raft of allegations which I can loosely put under the umbrella of accusations of state capture, that key business people, and many of them associated with one family, have peddled enormous amounts of influence at the heart of government. Now that family, the Gupta family, denies it, but nonetheless the people of South Africa clearly are deeply concerned about what they're seeing and hearing.
That's right. That's right.
So what I'm saying is, you said we may have to write the obituary of this organisation, my organisation, then. Things have gotten a whole lot worse since then.
That's true. That's true. I did say at some point that before things can come right, they've got to definitely get worse first.
You, in the end, I suppose, personally and institutionally as a key member of the ANC, you have to decide to what extent this is a Zuma problem and to what extent this is an institutional movement problem.
It's an institutional movement problem. Zuma, as the head of the organization, only serves to amplify that problem. But it's a movement problem.
You did call, I think, going back to this spring, you made a decision to call for Zuma to go.
Yes.
Not just as party chief, but as president of the country.
Yes. Because my belief is that, you know, if you are in a leadership position, you have the responsibility of guiding others. And whenever, you know, they get off the rails, you have the ability to pull them back. And that same conscience should help you as well. And so when you know, at leadership level,
you don't think Zuma has a conscience?
Well, to date it has failed him.
It's failed him. I mean, this is important because you know, our viewers and listeners around the world, some will be aware, some will not, the degree to which you represent one of those figures who is a conscience of the ANC. 10 years you served in Robben Island.
That's correct.
You were an activist through the liberation struggle.
That's correct.
You then served loyally Mandela and Mbeki. You've been a former interim president of the country yourself, widely respected, I think it's fair to say. When you stood up to read out the eulogy to one of your colleagues in the struggle, Ahmed Kathrada, and you chose to repeat his words that it was time for Zuma to go, so many other veterans and stalwarts stood up and applauded you. Did you know at that point that you were putting a nail in Zuma's coffin? Did you feel you were doing that?
No. No, because, you know, when conscience fails you, when consciousness deserts you, you know, moral appeals count for naught. They only serve to reinforce your inability to self-criticize.
So he is beyond any criticism, is he? I mean, it makes no difference to him anymore.
It makes no difference. Water off the back of a duck.
If you had had a vote in that secret parliamentary ballot, the motion of no confidence in Zuma, clearly you would have voted to get rid of him.
Well, you know, the ANC, in its messaging, public messaging, it ought to say it expects of all its members, all the time, wherever they are, to follow their consciences. Because they joined the ANC because of their consciences in the first instance. So for the ANC to say it does not expect and permit its public representatives at national level to be guided by their consciences was a completely wrong message.
Very interesting you put it that way. Your focus all about conscience. Many people in the ANC, those who are loyal to Mr. Zuma, they say the key pillar for understanding the ANC is the notion of it still being a revolutionary liberation movement, and that as a movement still engaged in the process of liberation, it has to have complete loyalty and discipline. And you have betrayed that loyalty and that value of discipline.
No. Discipline, as distinct from disciplinary procedures, means your attitude towards work, towards obligations, towards service to the people. That's what discipline means.
That's not what Mr. Zuma says. Mr. Zuma says it means confronting the enemy and always understanding who we are and who they are. And he says, and I'm going to quote him directly, our enemies trying to destroy the ANC and take control of the country are, to use his phrase, the representatives of white monopoly capital.
Well, let me tell you what's the nub of that problem, is that he uses himself and his name as a metonym for the ANC. And so for each one of his personal indiscretions, he expects the ANC to defend him. And by so doing, he's then in a position to say, well done, you've defended the ANC very well. But it's not the ANC, you see.
So you're saying that is a complete abuse, a manipulation of the movement?
He is a member of the ANC, he's the leader of the ANC. He found it already in existence with a culture and values and mores. And so he can't impose or substitute his own indiscretions for the ANC.
But it's not just Mr. Zuma, is it? I mean, the Chief Whip, Jackson Mthembu, he's talking about disciplining renegades. We have the police minister who at one point talked about putting a lie detector test on ANC MPs who may have voted secretly for the motion of no confidence. And one of the MPs who was honest, saying, I voted with my conscience, Makosi Khoza, she now faces losing one of her key roles as chairperson of the Parliament Portfolio Committee on Public Service because the ANC leadership seemed to want to punish her.
Well, if these leaders you've enumerated were just to pause and go through the ANC's constitution, they will discover that the Constitution stipulates that disciplinary proceedings must never be used for suppressing views, nor for promoting, intolerance, and also to settle scores.
But with respect, Mr. Motlanthe, you're losing the argument. We look at what is happening in the ANC day by day, and your view of how it should work and adhere to its own constitution bears no relation to the reality of what we see.
That's precisely my point.
So you need to quit?
No. My point...
The movement is going in a direction which you regard as completely illegitimate.
My point is you can't lead an organization by disregarding its own constitution. Otherwise, what's the point of codifying, procedures and regulations?
But that's what's happening. So one might turn that question around and say, what is the point today of the ANC? What is its purpose? If it has become so much a sort of caricature of the principles and values that you believe underpinned it earlier, if it's betrayed those principles, what is the point of it?
Precisely, that's the point. The question here: what is the point of it?
Well, you're one of the most senior figures in it, so you tell me.
The point is, the ANC is still a governing party in South Africa, and it's therefore very central in the polity of the country. Now, by literally walking over its own constitution, and it also shows on how it repeatedly fails to adhere to the constitution of the land. As a governing party,
yes, well, its legacy of repeated election victories is that it is the governing party. You could argue it's a monopoly holder of power in South Africa. But you seem to be teetering on the edge of something very important. You appear to be looking over the cliff edge, thinking, is it time for me to get out of this movement that has been so perverted? And yet when you get to that cliff edge, you don't make the rational move to get out.
No, the point is, if we are to salvage the ANC, that act can only happen once it has hit rock bottom.
With respect, you don't, I don't think, believe it's salvageable. This is what you said when somebody asked you a couple of months ago whether you might throw your hat in the ring to run for party leadership in December. You said, no, I don't think in that sense that I belong to the ANC, quite frankly. I don't see the value of joining crooked people. I think the way to relate to crooked people is to stay away from them.
True.
You've given up.
True. No. The point I'm making is, once you have people who are incorrigible and prove to be so through action, and then they organize themselves and they invite you and say, please come and lead us. It's like being invited by a gang. I say the entire leadership is crooked with a few exceptions. With a few exceptions. There are people in that leadership who are trying to stay on the straight and narrow path, and who are trying to do right, but they are overwhelmed by the network of crooked people, actually.
You're walking a very fine line here, but I'm going to invite you to keep walking. In terms of Mrs. Zuma, if I can call her that, the ex-wife of the president, she, it seems, is going to be sworn in as an ANC MP, and the rumour in South Africa is that she's very quickly going to be promoted to a senior position in cabinet as a preparation, because Mr. Zuma clearly believes she is the best candidate to become party chief. How would you respond if that happens?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, because she has remained on the reserve list of the ANC for Parliament, and so I suppose it's time to for her to take a place she remained in that reserve list even during her tour of duty as the AU Commission Chair.
If Dr. Dlamini Zuma were to become the next head of the ANC, would that be a good thing or not?
Well, that's a call that is to be made by the members of the ANC.
No, I'm asking you personally, in your position as a senior figure in the ANC, would it be a healthy thing or not?
Depends on whether she gets elected as a consequence of the free expression of the will of the members of the ANC. Because if she is sponsored by a network of people who disregard ANC procedures, she will be indebted to them. And therefore would be hamstrung in her leadership.
In brief, the other frontrunner over recent weeks and months in this race, of course not all the candidates declared yet, has been Cyril Ramaphosa, Vice President, senior union figure, but more importantly perhaps, one of the country's biggest business leaders, said to be worth between $400 and $500 million. I mean, his interests go across industry. He's also a renowned lover of the good life, if we can put it that way.
Yeah.
When you talk about the crisis in the ANC, would he be a man capable of addressing that crisis?
Well, as I said, every organization gets the leaders it deserves because the members would have elected that leader. So we deserve President Zuma as members of the ANC. So Mr. Ramaphosa and all the others who have raised their hands for leadership position in the ANC have done so in spite of a directive by the National Executive of the ANC, which is the highest decision-making structure. They've issued a directive to say, please let no one begin to speak about names.
Let's not get too procedural.
The nominations will only be opened in September.
Let me ask you just a very simple question with a simple answer required. Yeah. Who do you believe, when looking at the individuals who have expressed an interest in being the next party leader, who would be the best one, in your view, personal view, to take the ANC out of the mess it's in?
I don't know, quite frankly. I don't know. And I'm trying to explain as to why I'm nonplussed by this, because these leaders issue a directive to say no one must mention names, and they go out with branded regalias and cars,
they're campaigning
and they run open campaigns like it's never been seen before. And then they go back to their meetings of the National Executive Committee, and no one ever asks as to why they believe they still enjoy credibility, because it creates a credibility gap. If you say one thing,
a huge credibility gap.
If you say one thing and do the other.
Yes. Yeah. Give me a personal assessment. Why, after a generation, a full generation, roughly 25 years, roughly, has the ANC failed to deliver the progress that the people of South Africa, the black majority of South Africans, believed would come with liberation? Look at the figures on endemic poverty, joblessness, particularly amongst the young, where it's well over 50%, inequality. 10% of the people of your country own more than 90% of the wealth. Why such a record of failure?
Well, there are some improvements that have happened, compared to the olden days of apartheid. However, this failure is really due to a number of factors, one of which is short-termism in terms of how government plans. You see, it works on the basis of 5 years, and also weakening the state, the bureaucracy. Here you have what you call permanent secretaries. In South Africa, we have directors generals. And there's been a high turnover at that level, which means no institutional memory. Every time there's a reshuffle of cabinet, the new ministers don't even give themselves a week to go into the new department to assess the strengths and weaknesses. From day one, they are already accompanied by, when they report for duty, by 14 plus new bureaucrats. And so everyone is on a steep learning curve. A new political head and new senior managers.
Well, that's an interesting institutional take on what's wrong, but surely there's something much more...
It destabilizes the state.
Well,
because implementation is done by the state.
Interesting you put it that way, a sort of institutional analysis. The more crude analysis, perhaps, that I would say is that one of the failings of South Africa is that after liberation, the ANC became institutionalized, so that your democracy wasn't really a democracy where there was genuine choice. It was, in a sense, a one-party monopoly democracy, which, of course, is a contradiction in terms. Isn't it time for people like you, with all of the influence you can wield, to actually throw in your lot with a different political perspective? The Democratic Alliance, for example, now led by young leaders who are no longer white as they used to be in the past. Why don't you send a message by actually building bridges to them?
Well, there will be a realignment, certainly, of social forces in South Africa. And I'm dead certain that a new broad front will emerge.
What do you mean by that?
By that I mean that, you know, there will be, as is already happening, you know, you have coalitions and so on, there will be a broad front of confident, capable people who will create the environment in which the best available talent in South Africa can come
Will
forward.
the ANC split? You're being very...
The ANC has the possibility to renew itself, but that would take lots of courage. And failing that, it has to hit rock bottom. It has to lose elections for a penny to drop.
Would you like to see, hang on, that's so important, would you like to see the ANC lose the next, would it be good for South Africa if it lost the next election?
For as long as it is associated with corruption and failure, people will vote it out.
Would it be good for South Africa if it were voted out?
It will be good for the ANC itself.
And
if
for the people of your country.
Out, because let me tell you why. Because those elements who are in it for the largesse will quit, will desert it. And only then would the possibility arise for, you know, salvaging whatever is left of it.
You seem to be telling me if there were an election in South Africa tomorrow, you would not vote for the ANC.
Well, I'm a member of the ANC.
That doesn't matter. Would you actually vote for them?
The vote is a secret. You don't know.
I don't think you're making it much of a secret. I just wonder why you are not happy to say to me what is the only rational explanation for what you've just said, which is that it would be good for the ANC to lose an election.
Yes.
If you think that, then surely the logical conclusion is you wouldn't vote for it.
Well, I'll try to get it to win, but you know, I'm dead certain that at the rate at which you know, it is sliding to the bottom, it may actually lose the elections.
You think the next national election in South Africa, the ANC may lose?
Yeah.
That's extraordinary. I mean, you know, we're talking about a party which, since liberation, has commanded more than 60% of the vote.
It's not extraordinary, because political parties are established for a purpose, specific purpose. Maybe the ANC has achieved that.
And outlived it.
Yes.
Kgalema Motlanthe, we have to end there, but thank you so much
for
being on Hard Talk.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Fascinating.
Thank you.